So the last few years, and even more recently, the last few months, there's been some tremendous movement here, and I felt so inspired to share and that there seemed to be some sort of resolution, and I want to talk about trauma through awakening. Before I really get into it, I'd like to ask if you guys would like this, share it, repost it. I don't know how that works on this platform, but I'd like to get this to as many people as possible. This is just my opener video. There's going to be a whole series of what it's like to awaken with severe trauma. So a little bit of history, and I'll try to make all this brief in the interest of attention spans. A little bit of history, watching other folks and seeing videos and hearing stories, it became very, very clear that in terms of what the amount of pain that can be experienced in a life, that I had experienced a severe amount of it, a massive amount of it. The really quick history for those that don't know, and I think this bears for context. My mother and father were both alcoholics. My mother was severely abused as a kid, so I grew up in a very hostile environment. I grew up in an environment where I was emotionally and psychologically abused. That, of course, caused an awful lot of things to happen through my teenage years and through my adult life, up to and including heroin addiction, 2 overdoses, 2 suicide attempts, prison, some years in prison. In prison, I could tell stories for days. I don't normally talk about it. I was the one notable one, probably the worst day of my life, was I was in the worst prison riot in 50 years in the California prison system. The unofficial death count, which they never reported, was 9. And there were 1,000 guys on a yard going at it, trying to kill each other. So when I was there for that. At some point during prison, I found a book on meditation, and then found the 3 Pillars of Zen, and that book changed everything. I began to meditate a lot. I had a first awakening, a Kensho. That was, I would say, was at 14, 15 years ago. And my life was changed for forever. What wasn't changed was the unresolved trauma. So for the next decade or so, it was in and out and up and down. Huge openings, things that the only way I can describe them is direct contact with formless source. Mystical experiences, seeing no self, heart openings, having the self fall away, all sorts of weird information, insights, kind of all of it. But the common thread there was that it would open and then it would close back down again. And this led to some really deep frustration, just crazy amounts of frustration. And pair that with the trauma that I had already experienced, and it created a deep sense of despair for me. So even after a primary shift, without having any type of model, any type of framework for what had happened to me, very reluctant to talk to teachers, other speakers, scouring YouTube videos to go, where's my experience in this? Where are the people that are like me? Where are the trauma folks? And not seeing enough of them, or just not having the good fortune to have those folks come across my path. So I felt very alone. And it can create a real sense of deep frustration and bitterness to have, to use words, to have touched source, to have seen how beautiful life really is, the interplay of the absolute and the relative, and then have it close down again and then be stuck in this mundane world. And so for the last year or so, it's been, year, maybe 2 years, thereabouts. The process accelerated on its own. And as keen as I felt like my levels of perception were, I couldn't really see what was happening underneath it. This is the stuff wanting to come out, wanting to be felt through, wanting to be moved through. And it felt like continual death. And it felt like just a type of surrender that's not even a surrender. It's like a giving up based on despair and some unfelt through stuff, some unresolved stuff. And the message underneath was, okay, so I guess this is just as good as it gets. And I would take that message and really try to work with it and work with it and work with it and go, oh, it's just this, or it's just what's happening. And all of some of the non-dual pointers that we hear that, whilst are true, don't do anything to help the trauma survivor, to help the person who's just been crushed by life. Matter of fact, it's quite harmful because they can be dismissive. It's like bypassing. It's like repressing. So in the last few months, I've talked to and worked with a few teachers, which I was super resistant to. You know, I was in a community for a little while, and I just wasn't in a place to be in a community for a sense of, you know, there's not enough safety there for the trauma structure. And it's all been coming to a head. And something has felt like it needed to move. And even both of the teachers I talked to were like, yeah, you should share. And I always had this hesitance. And I'm looking back at my previous videos, watching sort of something come out and then pull back, and then something come out and pull back, all in the course of this short video. And I had an intellectual knowledge that had worked through, emotionally speaking, I would say a large portion of a lot of this trauma work. But what was still left, what was intact, was a functioning structure, was what it felt like. It's the only way I can describe it. A functioning, a lens through which I viewed everything. And I would find myself in struggles through the day of, like, you know, going out to the park, like this isn't my favorite park, and just being so blown out and so open and not here and just pure energy, and then getting around people and having it just close back down again, that guardedness. I guess you could say there were signs of this coming up, this recent collapse. My creativity has gone through the roof. There were things that happened where I just went, I don't care anymore. Like a really, really universal fuck it, but not with a sense of despair. I don't know how to describe that. I'm all in. And I had said those things before, many, many times, and really meant them at the time of, I'm willing to die, you know. Things like passive suicidal ideations and wishing, and this is recent, like within the last few years, of just wishing, all right, if I laid down and went to sleep and never woke up, be fine. Totally fine. Fuck this place. Doesn't matter what I've seen. Doesn't matter what my experiences have been. Doesn't matter how beautiful it is. Doesn't matter what it felt like when Source just basically blasted me off of the planet. I wake up every day and I'm guarded. I'm angry and I'm mistrustful. Even if they were slight amounts or if they were reduced, there's a structure underneath that. So there's the background there. And I had said a year ago, on some video or another. And then recently, I'm like, I should make a series about this, about the basic trauma structures, the severe trauma structures, and what it's like to go through an awakening like that. Because I don't see that a lot in videos and stuff. And that's fine. I don't know that everyone needs to air all their dirty laundry out. And there's, with trauma folks, there's a sense of maybe keep this stuff private. So I get it, but I'm going to air it all out. And I don't mean necessarily go into crazy details or stuff that's really horrifying. I gave a brief history to just touch on, and that was just a tiny slice of some of the horrors that I've experienced. For no other agenda than this is how I would treat me 3, 4, 5, 10 years ago. To have that voice, to hear that something say, you clearly aren't fitting into a lot of the awakening structures. And some of the models just don't line up for you, but it's okay. The process is happening. You are this, you are source. There is absolute perfection here. And I think there's a validity to it that only comes from hearing it from another trauma person. Because my patterns of speech change when I can sense very quickly where someone's at. And now I know a lot of why I can sense it. We radiate a signature. Seasoned, weathered, tired, maybe beat up, shredded, tattered, guarded, and all those have a signature out there. So I was laying awake in bed last night, and I made a video a couple days before, and I deleted it because I was still just stuttering a little bit, stumbling a little bit, like, And this is really fresh. And I woke up somewhere around 3 a.m, and it felt like I saw through the entire structure, the entire personality, defense system, energetically, that was creating this filter through which I viewed everything. And as I was just laying there, then it was this unfolding of, there's these 3 or 4 kind of main primary ways that trauma affects people, whether it's abuse or whether it's violence or whether it's validation or lack of validation or abandonment. And I went, I know all of these. And I know what it's like to have these manifest and then try to plug yourself into an awakening model. And I'm like, it's no wonder I rejected so many teachings that I heard, so much stuff and I mistakenly would accuse people of being insincere, or just doing this surface level stuff, this fluff, I called it. And I'm like, I don't fucking relate to you guys, but where are my people in this process? I don't want to see some mild-mannered sort of this lightheartedly, little mousy person talking about the stillness of awakening. And I'm like, shut the fuck up. What do you do when someone comes up and punches you directly in the face? Or how do you handle yourself in a prison riot? Or what's it like to come out of a heroin overdose and be mad that you're still alive? Because you tried to kill yourself. And I went, those are my people. And those few folks that I found, we gravitate towards each other. So I'm going to make a series of videos. To be very clear, I'm not a trauma counselor, just a guy. I'm an artist and tattooer. I'm hanging out in California. But as we would say in prison or in the hoods or whatever, my resume is really thick. You can check the resume. The experience of what it's like to interact with not only yourself, but this apparent outside world. Without knowing how it's unfolding can be debilitating. To do things like adopt non-dual language can be a place to hide. To watch and see other people share in videos or watch them be so lighthearted and so joyful because they've had a shift or an aperture opening or something fell away, and sit there and seethe with rage, with jealousy, with hurt, with despair. And go, why aren't I there? It's a big deal. It's a huge deal. And I think for the more severely traumatized folks, it can tend to turn us away. And when we're in that and so caught up, it's not just being caught up in a thought structure. It's not I'm just going to not be attached to this thought. I'm going to repress my thoughts. I'm going to push them away. None of that works because the trauma is so stuck in there. The energetics of it that's still in the body is automatic and overwhelming. And now I look at all of my rage and frustration and bitterness at people not being open and not being vulnerable, at not understanding where I was coming from, where I felt like, even in awakening circles, where all of us can be a little, where I'm like, I'm on the outside looking in. I can't even get into a community. You motherfuckers don't understand, you know? I'm not saying those statements are true. This is just what it feels like, right? Can be enough to turn people away. And in some instances, I've heard of people taking their own lives, you know? So I don't know that I'll offer any advice in this series of videos. What I will do is lay out some events, maybe some stories, and a clear model. Like I think I'm actually, rather than just showing up and riffing on a video, I'm going to make some notes, just some key points, because I got hit with a lot of stuff, insights all at once. And I went, I should probably at least jot down the main points. And again, if for no other reason than that other trauma folk that stumbles across this goes, fuck, thank God. I thought it was just me. I thought it was just me. Because there's a difference in between the circumstances of life that can cause you to surrender, to sort of break you down, you know, to cause to cause you to stop putting forth effort into the process, and the crippling sense, the despair that comes when that energetic trauma, that unresolved trauma, is thrown into the mix. And they're very different. And there's a deeper level of frustration there. So I do need to make a distinction in between the two, because it doesn't happen for everybody, you know, and that despair can be your best friend and your worst enemy. So again, if you guys want to share this, it's going to take a little bit for me to sort of get all of this out. I'll say it'll come out in the next week or 2 or 3. Initially, I have 2 or 3 videos I'd like to do, but this may just be sort of an ongoing thing. Because when I saw through the structure, it became just a structure. It no longer became an identity. And I'm not implying or promising that there aren't still habits and patterns and programming in the body, but it's like not being a slave to it, not being owned by it, not being mastered by it. You know, and that was part of what happened over the last few months, of me understanding the body is still trained. For instance, I sense danger because I was in prison. That personality is always going to be there, but it's not at the forefront anymore. Almost like it's there if you need it, You know, if there's something, one in a billion chance something weird happens and I happen to be there, well, I'll be able to handle myself. But whatever. But not the inherent bitterness and distrust. You know, it made so much sense to me that I watched, for time collapse completely, you know, in the non-dual space, and not and have space only collapse sometimes, because that's not safe out there. That space, that's a supposed external world, is exactly what brought me all of the hardship, all of the pain, all of the trauma. So why would I trust it to assume that that is me as well? Absolutely not. No fucking way. Fuck you. I'd rather go live in a cave, you know? So the space thing is that's something else I'll still work through. Sometimes it's there, sometimes it's not. Sometimes there's not two. Sometimes there feels like vestiges of a self protecting something. Fine. So if you made it all the way through, thank you so much. Please stay tuned if you want to share this with other people. Much love here, and that's it.